Hi there, Steve here. And I'm nearing the end of my Korean challenge. Essentially, I'm mostly reading, and of course I'm listening, but I don't understand a lot of what I hear. And so the major activity that I'm doing and that I'm enjoying is my reading. And reading, I want to dwell a bit on reading because it's such a powerful thing to do. And I talk about reading, and then I'm going to talk about some of these teaching fads like different learning styles or teaching critical thinking, which I think are quite unnecessary, and that reading is the fundamental empowerment tool that anyone involved in education should be most concerned about. So, first of all, insofar as my Korean, I'm reading my Korean history book with the Hanja, which I'm enjoying, and I'm learning a lot about Korean history, which is fun. I mean, you got to enjoy the history, the culture of the language. And of course, I read on my iPad, and there I have the advantage that I can hear.
앞머리를 짧게 하면은
I can hear individual words.
소리나
Or if I create a phrase, I can listen to the phrase.
소리나
And if I listen to the phrase,
앞머리를 짧게 하면은
so it's kind of helpful that if I had that coupled with my history book with the Hanja, I'd be in heaven. But I don't have that. I continue reading about the events in Korea right now, the impeachment of the president and all the stuff that's happening there. But reading, I keep on getting back to this. Reading is so important. I noticed, for example, let's get back to Boston, the ACTFL, American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages conference, where the teachers were all talking about, most of the people I spoke to were talking about compelling input, compelling content, things that Krashen is talking about, things that Bill Van Patten is talking about. And a lot of what they're into is finding or working with people who are creating accessible content. In other words, stories that are at a level that the learner can deal with. And of course, what a person is interested in is going to vary. I may not be interested in those stories. Maybe I'm keener to fight my way through this difficult political podcast, but I think a majority of people would rather read simple stories. Read. And so there's more and more of these readers being developed, especially for Spanish, which after all in the United States is the number one second language that's taught in the schools. And you'll remember that there was a fellow that came on here and said Krashen has ruined language instruction. And then he told me that he had 200 private messages at his blog. Like there were no comments on this blog that he put out, but he said there were 200 private messages to him saying that they agreed with him and that Krashen is terrible and stuff like that. However, Bill Van Patten has just been elected president of the Spanish Teachers Association in the United States. So perhaps it's not true that a majority of teachers are rebelling against Krashen's ideas or Bill Van Patten's ideas, which are largely the same, but rather more like it, they are continuing to try to get these ideas introduced in the classroom, because if you can get people to read and read a lot, they're going to do well in their own language, in their own academic or professional careers, and in learning foreign languages. And we know that in most societies, 30-40% of the people have poor functional literacy skills. They don't read well. They struggle with texts that are in any way complicated. And yet in the workplace, even to read a manual, if you're going to work in a factory somewhere nowadays, you need a good command of English. And so, and I mentioned too that the statistics of the social cost of poor reading skills is tremendous. People who are in prison and so forth and so on are overwhelmingly people who don't read well. So reading is the fundamental skill for language learning and for life. Read. And that's why I get so annoyed when I see these language teachers obsess over things like teaching critical thinking or teaching higher thinking skills or something like that. Critical thinking, I mean, all you need really to be able to have critical thinking skills, you have to have an open mind and you have to know a lot of stuff, because the more you know, the more you're able to evaluate the content that you're reading. If you know nothing about the subject, you don't even understand perhaps what they're talking about. If you have read widely on it and you know the history of this and you know different theories, the more you have read, the better capable you are of interpreting, of analyzing, or of even challenging. But of course, the whole critical thinking thing is all about getting people to challenge everything, challenge our society. The companies are corrupt and ripping us off. The system is, unfair. All of this challenging the established society. Whereas I tend to feel that the society we live in is actually quite good. We're doing quite well in terms of health standards, in terms of longevity, in terms of standard of living compared to 50 years ago, not only in North America, but in most parts of the world. So this critical thinking is more of a political agenda, really getting people to be able to read critically primarily means getting them to read better. More words, more vocabulary, read faster in order to read more so that they're in a better position to evaluate what they read. The same is true for this learning styles thing that some people have, kinetic learning or visual learning. Everyone needs to learn to read. Yes, depending on what the child already knows, depending on what the child likes to do, or an adult, then they may have different preferences. But I think fundamentally the brain learns the same way. And fundamentally, we know that high literacy is the best guarantee of both academic and eventually professional success. Not for everyone, but statistically, overwhelmingly. And if that's the case, if you are teaching in a school, don't worry about all these learning styles, which has been debunked, by the way. You just go Google, learning fads. Learning styles is a fad. For that matter, critical thinking is a fad. You'll find lots of serious studies that debunk all of this. And instead, the focus should be on teaching people to read. And if you're a language learner, focus on becoming a good reader in the language that you're learning. Now, maybe all you need to do is exchange a few pleasantries, or you don't want to go to the trouble of learning Chinese characters. Fine, but you're going to miss out. Ultimately, you'll only be able to go so far. So that's what I wanted to say today about the importance of reading. And because reading is so important and should be the focus of any teaching program, therefore I think this getting sidetracked into learning styles and teaching critical thinking is only a smokescreen, a distraction from the fundamental task, the teaching of the fundamental skill, reading. There you have it. I just thought I'd get that off my chest today. So, bye for now.